Are you cool with it being on recording?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. All right.
I'm going to use it against you, too.
There you go. Gotta pay for my keep,
I thought that was a tip for the great introduction.
No, that's way too big. My name's Ken Casey, and I'm an alcoholic.
Amen.
That was a wonderful introduction, Troy. Thank you so much. Sorry to disappoint. I found the program of Alcoholics Anonymous by accident. It was in November of 1985, and Halloween. A couple days before Halloween in 1985, I put my then wife into a treatment facility because she had been compromised at her job, and the options were to go to jail or go to treatment or whatever. So I called a guy that I worked with, and I said, I need to see if I can't get her into treatment. And he said, I'll call you back, and he did. I knew this guy was in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I also knew that I had a problem with alcohol. And I used to say to him, well, Dalton, his name was Dalton C. I said, Dalton, what do y'all do at those AA meetings? And he would say, well, there's one tonight at 7 o'clock, and I'll pick you up about 6:30, we'll go. And I said, no, I just kind of want to know what they do over there. Not real interested in going to one, but he said, well, the best way to find out what they do is to go. And so I would pass on his invitations, but I knew that he was the guy that I needed to call. So I called him, and he called me back, and he gave me this guy's name at the Chemical Dependency Unit in Corpus Christi, Texas. And he told me to call this guy Brad W., and I did. And he said, well, bring your wife over here, and we'll sit down and we'll do an intake assessment. So we did, and the whole time that we're sitting there, my wife at the time is like, she's not even there, she's hammered. I found out later that she drank a bottle of commemorative rum from the America's Cup races that I had been saving for like 15 years. And while I was gone running some errands before I took her to treatment. So anyway, but Brad, on this piece of paper, he drew this kind of a big circle, and in the middle of it he put a dot, and he said, now this is you, and this circle represents the wall that you built around you, and everybody's on the outside of that wall until you let them in, and then when you let them in, and then they start to move in closer to you, when they get too close, you throw them out and put them on the other side of the wall. And I'm sitting there going, God, this is what I do to people. And anyway, long story short and bearable, she was admitted, and Brad turned to me at the end of the session. He said, we have a meeting at 7 o'clock tonight here for family members of the patients, and I think that would do you some good. So I went to that, and this guy Pete P. was the facilitator of that meeting, and Pete said, I understand that we admitted your wife today. And he said, are you all right? Because you really don't look too good. And I said, no, I'm fine. I'm just shook up. And he said, well, I'm going to give you this schedule for Al-Anon meetings, and you might want to try that. Go to some Al-Anon meetings and see what that's like. So I went to some Al-Anon meetings, and now I am drinking heavily, and I am a blackout drinker, and my wife at the time and I were married about 4 months. We're not getting along all that well, but I go to Al-Anon because that's what I was told to do. And God bless Al-Anon, because they got me to AA. But I went to 4 or 5 Al-Anon meetings and nothing was clicking. But then one Saturday night I'm sitting alone at home, and I take out this schedule, and it says that there's an Al-Anon meeting at 7 o'clock at the Alanos Club of Corpus Christi, not the Alano, the Alanos. And They say it wrong down there. When I got hit to Houston, I used to say, you say it wrong, but I've changed my mind. And so I drove up to the address, and there was 2 buildings at that address. There was a little cottage and a big building. Well, which one do you think I go to? The big building. Because, that's where I got big problem. So I go in there, and there's about 100 people sitting in that meeting. And I know 3 of them because I drank with them and partied with them and did all kinds of weird, inappropriate shit with some of them. And at the end of the meeting, I got there a few minutes late, so I didn't hear, is there anyone at their first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous or anything like that? So at the end of the meeting, we stood up. They gave out these chips, which they didn't do in Al-Anon, but I said, well, I guess different place, so maybe they do different here. We did the Lord's Prayer at the end of the meeting, and then one of the guys that I knew came walking briskly towards me across the room, and he stuck out his hand. He said, I knew we'd see you here eventually. And I said, this was a pretty amazing meeting. I've been to 4 or 5 Al-Anon meetings, and this is the best one I've ever been to. And he looked at me and he said, this ain't Al-Anon, this is AA, and this is where you need to be. And that was my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous right there. But something about that meeting clicked in my head. And from that meeting, for about 5 months, I did not take a drink. I didn't do a hell of a lot else, but I didn't take a drink. But what got me to Alcoholics Anonymous was a long series of misadventures and not living the way I was brought up to live. My family of origin was a wonderful family. I was the youngest of 5 boys, and my name was somewhere between Bill, Jack, Larry, Rick, shit, what the hell's your name? Kind of thing. But we were a good family. My parents were wonderful. My dad was a dentist, had 5 boys. My mother, God bless her soul, she took the express route to heaven for putting up with all 5 of us. But by the time I came up to through my formative years and into teenage years, my parents had already been through it all. And there was no bullshitting them. There was no getting away with a lot. But my first drink, I caddied at a golf course up the road from my house, which my parents were members of, and I was the only child of a member that was allowed to caddy there because I was a pretty good caddy, I guess, when I was 13, 14, 15 years old. And made pretty good money for those times. We're talking the mid to late 60s. And one of the older caddies, we talked him into buying some booze for us and leave it at this one tree halfway up the road, and the one that's got the big mark on it or whatever. And 3 of us went over there and walked over to it, and the guy did what he said he was going to do. He left it there, and he got like 6-pack of 12-ounce beers and this bottle of wine and this bottle of stuff called Tango, which was artificial chemical screwdrivers, pre-mixed. And I blacked out that night. I remember going to the local burger joint. It was called Burger Chef back then, when they were still around. And that's the last thing I remember. I woke up in the shower at my house. My parents were there. They were awake. And then the next thing I remember was waking up in the morning, and of all the days, my mother decided she needed my help cleaning out the pots and pans cabinet in the kitchen. and she was slinging those pans around, and I was suffering. But they never said anything. And I found out later that my mother said, I just wanted to murder you with kindness. And, so that was my first adventure into drinking, and I was pretty much a blackout drinker for the rest of the time. I moved to California when I'd graduated high school in 1972, and I turned 18 in July of 1972, and the state of Rhode Island saw fit to lower the drinking age from 21 to 18, effective July 1st, 1972. So I was able to drink legally in the state of Rhode Island right after my birthday. Prior to that, I was just drinking illegally. I'm kind of convinced that there's two kinds of alcoholics. There's the convicted felons, and there's those of us that never got caught. And that pretty much breaks it down, really. My drinking continued along with some special effects. This is Alcoholics Anonymous, so I'll leave it at that. I went towards the University of Rhode Island for a semester. Yeah, I didn't go to it much. I went towards it. I re-enrolled for the second semester, and they sent my dad the tuition back, and they said, your son needs to do some growing up because he got 4 F's and a D in the first semester of college. I mean, that's not looking too promising. So, and when he got the check back, he said, "What the hell is this?" And I said, "I don't know, but I didn't want to go to college anyway. I want to go to California." And he said, "That's a bad idea." And I said, "When can I leave?" And he said, "Whenever you're ready." And I went to California, and I was a beach bum in Encinitas, California. Ron knows where that is. Sleepy little surfing town. Used to be sleepy. It isn't anymore, but... and I became a beach bum. And I was very, very good at that. And the qualifications of being a good beach bum is you're tan, you're jobless, you've always got beer and cigarettes, but you never have food or money. And I was pretty good at that. I don't know how it worked out that way, but, that's probably the best job I ever had. I can remember a few things that happened when I was living in California. One thing, we celebrated Cinco de Mayo in a town down in the Baja called Ensenada. And there's a little cantina down in Ensenada called Husong's Cantina. Pretty well known now, but it was just a little crap hole when we were down there. And we went down there to celebrate Cinco de Mayo. And I woke up on the 6th of May on the beach, on the Baja, and the bottle of mezcal that I had with me was empty. The worm was gone. And I had no food, no water, nothing. And I had no idea which way town was. And I was really, really suffering. I was so thirsty that I walked out into the Pacific Ocean and drank water out of the ocean until I vomited, projectiled all the way across Hawaii, I think. But I think that probably saved my life because I'm pretty sure that I had alcohol poisoning and it got it out of my system. So if you're looking for a homemade remedy of a stomach pump, just go drink a little bit out of the Gulf of Mexico and it'll probably clean you out pretty good. Another story in my drunkalog, and then I'm going to end it there because is there anybody in here that doesn't know how to drink? Okay. I got on a train in San Diego going to Portland, Oregon. I was running a little errand for a friend. We'll leave it at that. One of those felonies I never got caught at, you know. But they had a club car. I had a Pullman car, you know, bed pulls out of the wall and you could sleep. And it was like a 40-hour train ride, I think, something like that. I know it was at least one night overnight. And they have a club car, and at the end of the club car, there's a bar. Now, I'm on a train that's going from Los Angeles to Portland, Oregon, nonstop. And I got cut off in the club car. And I wasn't blacked out that night, but I looked at the bartender and I said, "I'm not driving." You know? And he said, "No, I can't serve you any more alcohol. You've had more. I shouldn't have served you the last two." But and those are some of the highlights. I could get into some of the real off-color lowlights, but alcohol took me places that I never dreamed I would go, doing stuff I never thought I would do with people I never thought I would associate with. And I went there willingly. And I did it willingly. And I just didn't know. I had no idea what my real problem was, and I didn't find out what my problem was until I got into Alcoholics Anonymous and listened to a few people that shared their story. See, a lot of people talked to me about my drinking and my behavior. Well, hell, you didn't have to be an alcoholic to behave the way I behaved if you drank the way I drank. Mother Teresa could have done some of the shit I did if she drank the way I drank. What makes me an alcoholic is that once I start, I can't stop. Sometimes I might, but I never know when. And when I'm not drinking, I'm thinking about drinking. You ever have one of those days where you're just so hungover that you wake up and you say, "I will never, ever, ever do that again. I am done." Till about 10:30. And then, you know, if I have a beer at lunch, I could probably get over this hangover a little quicker. So, you know, that's my plan now, is I'm just going to have a beer at lunch. Now, it's at 10:30 in the morning. Now, I'm supposed to work from 8 to 5. And at 11:15, I get this mysterious phone call that's never happened that tells me I need to go to lunch with this guy at 11 o'clock. And so I got to go tell the receptionist I got to go meet this guy at 11 o'clock for lunch. I'm gone. I have a beer. I have 2 beers. I have 3 beers. I don't show back up that day. All the stuff that was so important for me to do at 9 o'clock in the morning that it had to be done by noon or had to be done by the end of the workday, all that stuff went away because the obsession about that beer that I was going to have at lunch crept in. And that obsession took over any thought of the other stuff that needed to be done. So I'm powerless over the amount that I take in when I'm drinking, and I'm powerless over thinking about it when I'm not drinking. And I am powerless over alcohol, and it's making my life totally unmanageable. I had no idea that's what alcoholism was. None at all. I just thought I drank like the people that I hung out with drank like. Because if you didn't drink the way that I drank, I didn't hang out with you. You were kind of in the way. I would tolerate you for a little bit, but then you'd have to go. You were one of those people that I let in over the wall, and now you're interfering with me over here in the middle of this circle. you got to go. You're banished from the castle. And, that's the way it was. I remember I got a letter from my father, who never wrote a letter ever. He wrote me one letter when I was living in California, and it read, Kenny, I hope you're okay. Call your mother. She hasn't heard a word from you in 6 weeks or 2 months or whatever it was, and she's crying herself to sleep every night. Dad. I'm not hurting anybody but myself. Part of the reason I wanted to go to California was so that they didn't have to watch me do this, watch me live the way that I wanted to live. But yet it was affecting them 3,500 miles away. I didn't understand the effects that my alcoholism was having on other people. Those people that I'm not hurting. I'm not hurting anybody but myself. A guy in a meeting, first time I ever heard it, said something like, you can stay with us, work a few simple steps, put the plug in the jug, not drink one day at a time, and do what we're doing here, and stay sober, or you can go back out, destroy your life and the lives of the 10 people that love you the most. It's your choice. It's your choice. It wasn't until then that I knew I had some kind of a choice. I started going to meetings regularly in November of 1985, and I stayed sober. I did not do any of the step work. I did 1, 2, 12. 1, 2, 3, maybe 12, but that was it, I can't, he can, I think I'll let him, now I gotta go save some people. Go knock some drunks off of bar stools in downtown Corpus Christi and see if they want to hear the message that I'm going to bring to them. And that didn't work. Step 4, the way the old timers talked about Step 4 and the way it's written, and there's 2 words in Step 4 that kept me from doing it the first time, and that's fearless and moral. And the way the old timers used to talk about it was scary. It was very, very scary for me. In March of 1986, actually the end of, it was March. I had a herniated disc in my neck, and I had to go in and have surgery. I had the disc removed and fusion in my neck, and the rehab for that was to lay in bed at least 20 hours a day. Whenever I was up out of bed, I had to put on this ridiculously hard neck brace that was just the most uncomfortable thing ever. I couldn't ride in a car, I couldn't do anything, just lay in bed. And on the bed next to me was a big book and a telephone. And for 30 days, I didn't reach for either one of them. Would anybody like to guess what happened? Had a doctor's appointment at 2 in the afternoon, went to see the doctor. He said, okay, you can get up and you can walk around with this soft neck brace on. And you can ride in a car, but short distances and no driving. And I said, okay. Now, my wife had gone into treatment, and my first wife, had gone into treatment, and she was staying sober in the program. And I was sober in the program. We were like, Ozzie and Harriet of Alanos Club in Corpus Christi, Texas there for a little bit with a newcomer couple. And they were loving us till we could love ourselves, I'll tell you that. But I picked a fight with her in the afternoon, and I walked down to the bar that I always drank in. See, I always had this thing in the back of my mind, I'm going to go out of town on a business trip, and nobody's going to know me, and I'm going to be able to have a couple of beers, and it's going to be okay. The book talks about the lurking notion. Well, that is not what happened. I pissed her off good, on purpose. Walked down to the bar that I'd been drinking in, and everybody said, "Man, where you been?" I said, "I've been going to AA. So, we have a double rum and Coke." You wonder why people out there say, "That shit don't work." Anyway, I drank all that afternoon and into the wee hours of the morning. That was on April the 21st. I walked out of the house and I walked back in about 4 o'clock in the morning on April the 22nd of 1986, and that was the last time that I drank. And that's God's fault, not mine. I want you to know that. The only reason I stand before you sober 39 years and some days of continuous sobriety is through the grace of God, rooms like this and folks like you that have shown me a way to live without having to take a drink one day at a time. I had to quitting drinking because quitting drinking wasn't working. So I quitting drinking, and I started living one day at a time without having to take a drink. And it made all the difference in the world. Quitting has such a negative connotation to it, and the permanency of that is just unacceptable. I could get away with not drinking one day at a time. I was okay with that. But quit drinking? That's what an order. I can't go through with that. So I came back in the program after about 4 hours of sleep that next Saturday. It was a Saturday, and I sat down next to a guy that I had known in the program who was a retired lieutenant commander in the Navy. And his name was Mike G. And Mike became my second sponsor because my first sponsor was, I don't know why I picked him. I think he made me laugh a few times, and I thought he'd be cool, but he didn't push me to do anything, and I didn't. I just wasn't moving in the program. It wasn't his fault, it was mine. But at the end of the meeting, they asked if anybody wanted a white chip, and I got up and I took it, and I came back, and Mike stood up and he gave me a big hug, and he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, Mike, I'm not. I'm dying. And will you help me?" And he said that he would. And he started that afternoon at his house. We started going through the steps. And the way Mike took me through the steps is he said, "Do you believe you're powerless over alcohol and that your life has become unmanageable?" And I said, "Absolutely." He said, "Do you believe that there's a power greater than yourself that could restore you to sanity if you gave him the chance?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you want to make a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of that power that's greater than you? Are you willing to make that decision today?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You've now done the first 3 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you'd like for them to last, you need to do 4 through 9. So he pulled out a yellow pad and he drew some lines and he wrote some words and he said, "Go home and fill this out and we'll meet next Saturday and we'll go over it, and then you'll have 1 more week to finish it with the corrections that we go over next week, and then you'll do your 5th step." And I said, that's rushing it a little bit, don't you think, Mike? I mean, I'm kind of busy. And he said, you found time to drink? I said, yep. He said, you found time to screw up your life and everybody else around you? Yeah. Well, you'll find time to do this if that's what you want. And so I went home and I did the best I could, and when I brought it back to him, he said, you're not understanding the process very well, so here's the way we're going to do it. And he did it. He did it in columns, and then I read it back to him on my fifth step in rows. And I found out later that that's kind of the way you're supposed to make a list and then follow it through. He was a very organized individual. He had been to found out later that he was a graduate of the Naval Academy, and like I said, he was a retired lieutenant commander in the Navy. That held me in pretty good stead later on. I'll bring you the rest of that story later on. But Mike took me through the steps, and I walked in to do my fifth step, and he said, well, let's sit down, and he said, let's pray about this before we get started. And I said, well, okay, but I don't know what prayer to say. He said, I'll come up with something. And he did. He came up with something like, God, please be with us while we do this. Help us to be truthful, honest, and open-minded and willing, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right. Tell me the three things you don't have written down and you were not going to tell me today. I said, what? He said, tell me the three things that are not written down on that paper that you were refusing to tell me today. I said, well, Mike, it's only two. He said, well, tell me. And I told him. And the rest of it was easy after that. It was easy. Not pleasant, but it was more palatable to go through it. And at the end of the fourth and fifth step, he said, okay, you've now completed your fourth and fifth step. Are you still alive? I said, yes. This will not kill you, despite what you think, and despite what you may have heard around here. If you do the fourth step and the fifth step, you will not die. If you don't, you might. And that has resounded with me since the day he first said it to me. This disease has the power to kill, and it does not discriminate in any way, shape, or form. You can be white, you can be black, you can come from Yale or jail or carrying the U.S. mail. It doesn't matter. Alcoholism will kill you. The really bad news is it won't do it quickly. The car accident you may get into might, but to die an alcoholic death, rotting from the inside out, is a miserable, miserable death. And if you've never seen anybody that's dying of alcoholism in an institution with a wet brain, go check it out. One of the first 12-step calls that I did with an older guy in AA, I say an older guy, he's a lot younger than I am now, but I walked into the Alanos Clubhouse in Corpus one day about 2 o'clock. I was at my wit's end. I wanted a cup of coffee or a beer. I decided to go to the Alanos and get a cup of coffee. And I walked in there, and the guy says, man, I'm glad you're here. Get in the car. We're going to the hospital to see this guy who's having trouble staying sober. I said, well, I don't know how to do this. He said, you don't need to do anything, just be with me. He said, we don't do 12-step calls alone, number one. Number two, I'll do all the talking, you don't have to say a thing. I said, okay, under those conditions, I'll go with you any way you tell me to. I had been sober maybe 3 months, and this was after I had gone out and come back in. We went over there, and this guy that we went to visit had been on a 12-day bender. He had been in the program before. He was absolutely yellow as could be. He was as yellow as a Big Chief pad. And his eyes were just all sunk back in his head. He was skinny and frail. And the guy that I was with talked about, coming back into the program. And the guy says, if I ever get bad enough, I'll come back. But until then, I don't even want y'all coming around. So the guy turned to me, he said, okay, let's go. And we walked out, and then we got down to his car. He said, well, what do you think? And I said, what do I think? I'm not real sure I want what you guys have, but I damn sure don't want what he's got. And he said, that's a start. That's what's available to you if you continue to live the way you were living. And I had a brother-in-law that spent 2.5 years in a nursing facility with a wet brain, not able to get up and get out of bed, not able to go to the bathroom on his own, not able to eat on his own. And the major problem he had was untreated alcoholism. And I would go to see him, not because I was a good friend or anything like that. We didn't get along very well. But I would go to see him, and he would say, oh, Ken, man, I'm so glad you came. He's, I've been in here a couple of weeks now. And I said, Bill, you've been here 2 years. You've been here over 2 years. And he says, really? He said, hey, is there any way you can go out and get me a couple of beers and bring them back into me? But you got to hide them under your coat because they won't let you bring them in. That's all he wanted. He wanted a couple of beers. This disease was killing him. It was eating him from the inside out, and that's all he could think about. So I've had the fortune or the misfortune to watch several people in here die of the disease, and I've known several people that have put a bullet in their mouth, stone cold sober, because they refused to work the program. They were as sober as could be, but there was something out there. There was some ghost that was just haunting them. And it came from not working all the steps of the entire program all the time. The 12 and 12, the beginning of the 12 and 12, it says, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, a set of principles. The 12 steps are a set of principles. Spiritual in their nature, that when practiced as a way of life, can restore the user to usefully and happily whole, or words to that effect. But I can't just take the word that around here we've got these principles broken down to one word, and that's kind of a sticking point for me personally, my opinion number 10,000. I need to work the whole step, not just the one-word principle, because I can skirt the issues an awful lot with just that one word. And that's not going to affect you guys. Well, it might affect the way I act around you. but it's going to affect me. I'm the one that's going to pay the big price. And I don't want to pay the price anymore. I'm a guy that does my best to attack a problem with the 12 steps. I'm not a guy that goes to some buzzwords and says denial, acceptance, blah, this, that, whatever. Brotherly love. I got to take that problem and I've got to insert it into the first step. Whether it's a person, situation, or a thing. And I put it in the place of alcohol in that step one. I'm powerless over that. And it's making my life unmanageable right now. And I don't like it. And can a power greater than myself restore me to sanity? Well, it's done it so many times before, because I don't stay sane. I kind of drift in and out. And why won't he do it this time? So, step 2. Step 3, make a decision. Do I want to turn this over to God? Yes. Step 4, do I need to write about it? Do I need to visit with somebody about it? All of this is captured in 10, so for people that live in 10, 11, and 12, I understand that. But for me, my first big book has the whole margin in the 10th step is full of how it turns back to step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I just go through the steps. And I can take a problem, if I'm willing, and run it through the steps and find relief. And I can do that in 10 or 15 minutes. If I'm willing. Notice that word, if I'm willing. Some of this stuff, I like hanging around in a rut. Give an alcoholic a good rut and we'll carpet that son of a bitch and move some furniture in and invite a few of our closest friends in because y'all love to help other alcoholics, right? And we'll sit in it and get sick together. And I've done that. And I've done it. Went through step 5, did that with Mike. He said, go home, do exactly what the book says. I did 6, I did 7. At the moment I read step 6 out of the big book, I was entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And on step 7, immediately following that, I asked him to remove my shortcomings. Since that day, I have been trying to get back to be entirely willing to have God remove all of those defects of character. It comes and it goes. It's a daily thing for me. Anger, horrible. But it sure feels good sometimes. Righteous indignation, what a feeling. It's not me. You know. That all leads to resentments, by the way, and resentments have the power to, So we go to 8 and 9. Mike said, here's a list of some of the people you need to make amends to. And I said, all those people? Some of them I just had a resentment against. He said, well, did you assassinate their character either verbally or mentally? I said, yes. He said, you need to make amends to them. Once again. He said, let's break it down this way. Get you some index cards, and we're going to make 3 stacks of index cards, and we're going to... The amends you're willing to make immediately, go in pile number 1. What the person is, what the amend needs to be, and then we'll discuss how to go about doing it. Pile number 2 is you got to make this amend, but you need a little time to think about it first. And pile number 3 is, I'm never going to do this shit. Ever. And bring it back to me and we'll discuss it. And I went back to him, and he used to give me a week to do this stuff. And I brought it back to him, and he said, this is pile number 1, and he looked through it and set it down. Pile number 2, he looks through it and set it down. Pile number 3, he looks through it and, ooh, go do these. I said, that's the pile I'm not going to do, Mike. You must have misunderstood. He said, no. He said, we're going to go through these index cards one by one. I'm going to tell you how we're going to go about doing this. And he said, when you make an amends to someone, you are to never say the words, I'm sorry, or but. Run that through your heads a little bit. If I tell people I'm sorry, I've already told you I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but I can't pay you back. I'm sorry, but I'm going to do this again on Tuesday. I don't need to tell people I'm sorry. They pretty much knew it already. Because I would hear them mutter it under their breath. Sorry, son of a bitch. As I would walk away. And he said, anytime you use the word but, you are qualifying your behavior as to why you behaved the way you did. I stole your car, but if you hadn't left the keys in the ignition, I said some inappropriate things to you, but if you hadn't... very... kind of, I got to take full ownership of it. And I can't lessen that in any way by using qualifiers in it. And I was told that you will not make an amends unless you've gone over it with me. I was so guilty. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of, well, I was born and raised Irish Catholic. And we do a couple of things really, really well. We drink, and we're guilty. I don't know what we're guilty of, but we're damn sure good at it. And if you've got an Irish Catholic mother, she will inform you of why you should feel guilty. Not necessarily the action, but you shouldn't feel good about that. So I was ready to make amends to people that I had no business making amends to. I mean, I've often said I would have made amends to the British government for throwing the tea off of the boats in Boston. It happened hundreds of years before I was born if I could stay sober because of it. But that didn't have anything to do with why I was able to stay sober. I had to clear off my side of the street. What I was responsible for and the stuff that I was not responsible for, I needed to leave that in God's hands, and He would find a way to make it happen. So I did the amends. And one amends that I had was to a utility company that I had forgot to pay, I think. And I owed them a little bit of money. And Mike said, get the money together, all of it, or you can go down there and you can say, I can pay you this much a month, but it's not a huge sum of money. It's like $300. He said, you can come up with $300. So I came up with $300, and I went in there, and it had been a couple of years. And I went in there, and I got the cash in my pocket. And I walk up to the window, and the lady says, can I help you? And I told her that there was about 3 years ago, I had utilities with you folks, and I didn't pay my bill, and at the time, I owed you about $260, and I'm here to pay that and whatever interest you have accrued on it. She said, what was your name? And I told her. She said, what was your date of birth? And I told her social security number. I told her. She said, wait right here. So she came back with this other lady, and she's looking at the computer, and she's looking at all this stuff, and she said, well, that's been written off. We can't accept your money. And I said, well, I owe you the money. And she said, but our books have to balance. You don't understand. If we can't take money in that it's already been written off, it's going to cause accounting problems down the road. We're going to have to make adjustments and all of that. So once we write it off, it's written off. We appreciate you coming in, but we can't take your money. So I walk out the door, and I am just, this is awesome. So I call Mike, and I said, Mike, this amends deal is really working out. Why? What happened? I tell him the story. He said, well, what's your favorite charity? I said, what? What's your favorite charity? And I said, well, I've never thought about that much, Mike. He said, well, think about it. You got 24 hours, and you're going to give that money to a charity because it's not your money in the first place. And I'm sitting there going, this son of a bitch, it's in my pocket. Possession is 9/10 of the law. Nope. And he would say shit like, you want to stay sober? If you had your way with that $300, how long would that last at Cooper's Alley, which was the bar I drank in? No, not long. Well, give it to a charity. So I wound up having to give that money away. Having to. I had to give it away. He made me do it. It was kind of freeing. So my amends went like that. And then Mike moved away from corporate, so I got my next sponsor, who was Chuck C. And Chuck C. had been in the program a year when I came in, and he was my sponsor for 34 years, I think. He's dead now. All three of my sponsors have died, so if I ask you to be my sponsor after the meeting, Brendan, I would not say yes. I'm just saying. I have a way of killing them, apparently. Actually, anybody that's older than I am is on borrowed time anyway. But Chuck, I would visit with Chuck pretty much once a week. We talk on the phone every day, but I own my own business, and I was having these money issues. I know I'm getting close to time, but Chuck looked at me one day and he said, you know, you worry about money all the time. He said, I believe money's a higher power to you. And I said, what? He said, I believe money is your higher power. That's all you've talked about the last 2 years. He said, do you want to why don't you give some money away to somebody? And I said, well, Chuck, you don't understand. I don't have money. That's why I'm always thinking about it. He said, try giving some away. You got enough to do that. He said, you've got a boat. We've got a fishing cabin. What are you all stressed out about money all the time for? He said, give some of it away. And so I started to, little bit. Don't come and ask me for any. Because he said, give it away anonymously. And I started to do that, and money lost the power that it had over me when I did that. It was kind of magical. And I discovered that the fear of financial insecurity has absolutely nothing to do with money and everything to do with fear. And fear was driving me, and it still drives me today. if I go flat ass broke tomorrow, I know how to hold the shovel. I will find a way to eat. It's not the financial insecurity I'm afraid of, or it's not the financial insecurity, it's the fear that drives me in the wrong direction. I've always made a way to make ends meet, somehow. Been doing it for 71 years. I think it's going to work out for the rest of the day. And who knows what tomorrow brings. But you know, I can't thank you enough, Trey, for asking me to come up here and speak. Troy, I'm sorry. And I hope that somebody heard something in here that they can take with them. I never know what I'm going to say when I get up here. I mean, there's a few parts of my story that are fixed. If you wanted a real drunk-a-log, it would be mostly hearsay. And through the miracle of credit card receipts, because a lot of it I was blacked out through. And, you know, had I known my drunk-a-log was that important, I'd have paid better attention when I was doing it. But I do remember my last drunk. I don't ever want to forget it. And the other thing I don't ever want to forget is the hope that's in these rooms. There's some kind of spiritual power that happens in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for me that doesn't happen anywhere else, ever. Now that could be at a meeting like this, or it could be a meeting with 4 or 5 people in a garage somewhere, or it can be sitting at lunch with another member of Alcoholics Anonymous talking about program stuff, or going through some of life's issues. You know, it's the beauty of this program is that we're not all crazy at the same time, but we all understand what it is to be crazy, or to feel crazy. And after all, we are the people our parents warned us about. In the words of the late great prophet Jimmy Buffett, you know, it's amazing the life that have been given in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous because of people like you and a loving God and 12 steps. Thank you very much for hanging in there and listening to me. Have a good evening.
Let me turn this thing off real quick.